evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm just going to mute some of you that have come in unmuted, just because there was a bit of background noise. So yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for this webinar hosted by Belly Balance and Bay's Kitchen. All about managing IBS, real stories, low FODMAP tips, and expert advice. So we will make a start. I think a few people are kind of joining as we go, but we are now 3 minutes past 7:30. So I'd love to get started. And this webinar will last approximately 1 hour with time for questions at the end. So the actual talking from me and Hattie will be just under an hour and we'll allow time for questions. I just want to start by saying hello. My name is Kaitlin Colucci and I am a consultant dietitian at Belly Balance, representing the Belly Balance brand this evening. I have been working with Belly Balance for almost 2 years to help with the expansion of the app into the UK market, as it was originally a product born out of Sweden from the founder, Sofia Antonsson, who is a big IBS dietitian and very well known in Sweden. So this evening, I will be talking a little bit more about the app itself, as well as low FODMAP tips and expert advice. So I'll just hand over to Hattie very briefly to introduce herself also.
Thank you, Kaitlin. Very excited to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Hattie, and I have been with Bay's Kitchen IBS inspired foods for coming up to a year now, running everything from across the board, building our brand from sales to marketing, but getting to know our consumer and our customer. So this is why I'm super excited about today to be speaking directly with, those who are impacted by low FODMAP, gut health and IBS in particular. And we're going to be sharing my stories as well as Kaitlin's personal journey and story, and just understanding how to manage and how to work through those individual journeys. So yeah, very excited to be here.
Perfect, thank you so much. And actually, okay, no, sorry, I was just trying to sort out the presenter layout. Has that changed for anyone?
That looks quite good. Yeah, we can see you now properly.
You can see me next to
And
the
yes,
presentation.
yeah, nifty.
And what if I do this and make it bigger? Is that better?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, this is, I think, what I wanted. So like I am next to the presentation.
You are, yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's what we wanted. Great. And I think when you talk, then you should also come up. So great. Okay. Perfect. So just a few housekeeping rules as we get started. So first of all, a big warm welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to join us live this evening for everyone that is here. Please do drop your questions in the chat throughout the presentation and then we will answer them all at the end. And there will be an opportunity for you to jump on microphone or camera to ask us your questions also. Just to make you aware that this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available on the Bay's Kitchen YouTube channel and within the Belly Balance app and our social media platforms. So if you're unable to watch live and you're watching this back, then you'll be watching the recording, or if you're unable to stay for the whole thing and see the end, then you can catch the end when we send out the recording to you. So please do get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of tea, get settled, and I really hope that you enjoy this session. It's absolutely packed with some really beautiful personal stories from myself and Hattie, as well as lots of takeaway tips and expert advice, which we're hoping that you can implement that will make your IBS journey just that little bit easier. So I'm going to pass over to Hattie.
Amazing. Thank you, Caitlin. So yeah, this is actually the first time I've really spoken openly about my personal journey with IBS. Professionally, I talk about it a lot because I work within an FMCG challenger brand environment, which supports gut health. So I'll come on to all about Bay's Kitchen, but yeah, as a on a personal level, this is the first time I'm really speaking about the journey that I've been on with it, which has been, somewhat as a battle for many years, and it's become a really good time because I've actually really had a breakthrough with what's worked for me and what I have done to get some answers. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call, if you are in the trenches of it and really, struggling with where to go next once you've tried everything, hopefully it's a a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel that, after 5, 6 years of just searching for answers and not being able to, identify triggers or understand what's happening to me and why I'm so, why I some foods affect me more than others, to finally get those breakthroughs is has been such a massive relief for me. So yeah, Caitlin, if you go on to the first slide, please. I've just popped a little bit of a hello from me. So, as I mentioned before, I recently stepped in as managing director for Bay's Kitchen, which is the UK's first low FODMAP certified range of cooking sauces and stocks. So there are lots of brands doing it over in Australia, but in the UK there's not a brand that's doing this across so many different cuisines and condiments and cooking stocks that are all made specifically for a low FODMAP diet. So obviously those terms of gluten free and dairy free are non-negotiable when it comes to that need state. But low FODMAP, as we know, goes a little bit further. It's a lot more complex. So, our cooking sauces are made without onion, garlic, and all certified in ingredients and measures. So, yeah, it's a new chapter for me. As I say, I stepped in 10 months ago, still very much finding my feet. But in terms of professional levels and understanding, the personal journey with it and struggling with it, it's been incredible. But I think where it starts is really my relationship with food. And I am first and foremost a massive foodie, and I always have been. I love food is my love language. So I met my other half literally through dining out and going to restaurants and cooking and having those home comforts at home, and I think we definitely share, as I say, a shared love language of food and those experiences together. And as I say, about 5, 6 years ago, I started to navigate through what turned out to be a really challenging few years, which from reflection of what I actually, how I handled myself in early years has been really eye-opening for me. So I love to exercise. I love to move my body in lots of different ways. I'm a runner. I was a dancer for many years. I love to lift weights. I love to do hit and high rocks. And over the years, I definitely have potentially overtrained and alongside that, caught up in, I would say, crash diets. So, growing up as a girl and, wanting to look a certain way and have a certain type of image, I have spent years not eating carbohydrates. I have spent years thinking bread is the enemy and that, I need to just eat, salads after salads and I can't have certain foods. And, I think what I've done is completely overexhausted my body and it's ultimately led to chronic IBS. And so I've completely fallen out of love with food and fallen out of love with the joy of food, which I got to a real low point to go, I am waking up in fight or flight mode, putting my body through a lot of stress and a lot of a lot of pressure, I would say. And the massive thing that has really helped me is to strip everything back and to slow down. And what I believed was I thought I was doing my body really good by getting up and running 10 miles and then fueling back with some bit of egg and tomato and avocado and not fueling my body in the right way has led to, flare ups and frustrations. So I think the biggest thing for me was stepping back and listening to my body and learning to slow down. And I actually sought out a coach, a nutritionist who has helped me understand food and understand my body and understand my low FODMAP triggers. And my biggest breakthrough, which is just crazy, once you start on the low FODMAP diet and it feels almost impossible to stick to. So you do your 3 weeks of reducing out carbohydrates, gluten, dairy, introducing, all of those other alternatives. And what I found is actually fructose was a really, really big trigger for me. So my lovely honey on my cereal and the amount of berries and fruit I was eating and a real combination of, that throughout the day, I realized that I was FODMAP snacking with fructose. I've put on here a selection of images just to share some of the little snippets that's where my journey's been on. So, that's my breakfast now, which is more food than I could ever, think of eating a couple of years ago, where I'm supporting my body with the right kind of carbohydrates, protein, eggs, kiwis, which are amazing for your digestion, and lactose-free yogurt. As really one of my biggest triggers again is dairy. And I did this from going to I went into my local pharmacy and got a test done to show some of to see what I was intolerant to, and found out that I was really, really intolerant to cow's milk. So that again massively helped me step on in the journey. Two other key, areas that I think have really helped me, and this here is actually a scan of my stomach. I went to go and see an incredible lady who does lymphatic drainage. The top scan on the right is on the sort of on the red patches. It was stagnant fluid that was in my stomach that I was holding on to through the amount of stress that I was putting my body under by underfueling, overtraining, and letting the pressure get to me. And the below scan is actually after an hour and a half worth of lymphatic drainage. It was pretty life changing. I felt like a different person. I felt like, I felt like I could breathe again coming out of that session. So, as a personal, breakthrough for me, lymphatic drainage matters have been huge. And then finally, when I say slowing down, I've got a big lift in the sign in the gym there. I have now taken up Pilates, and I now lift weights instead of doing HIIT training 7 times a week, and learning slow and sustained movements. And everything just seems to have calmed down, and everything feels manageable. And when my body isn't in stress and I'm eating the right things and fueling, and also figuring out those dairy and fructose triggers, it's been life changing. So it's been a journey, but it's deeply personal to me. But it's a couple of really easy steps that I've taken that have really helped me see my way. So that is kind of my personal journey summed up. Yes.
Thank you so much, Hattie. That is such a beautiful story and a beautiful journey, and one that I'm sure so many people watching can resonate with. And I think, thank you so much for sharing about your experience with the different practitioners that you've worked with. Also, that lymphatic drainage image is just fascinating. What I find really interesting is the image at the top where you had the build up of fluid and like the red
Yeah.
patches, is it saying your
Mm.
temperature is lower than post lymphatic drainage?
It actually was. So I did ask the question of that, and she said that because of the stress levels that I went into the massage with, after I'd come out, I was, I'd cooled my body down and had a much calmer, state of feeling within myself.
Mhm.
And afterwards, I honestly felt so much lighter, and it's just really interesting. I don't find, lymphatic can work for some people, but for me it was a bit of a breakthrough that I need to slow down, I need to calm down, and I need to learn, how to move my body in the right way instead of so much stress.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And yeah, it's amazing how you've ended up at Bay's Kitchen because, like you say, it's
Yeah,
really, yeah, it's a
personal.
company. Yeah, it's really personal and a
Yes.
company that can support you in many ways. So I'll share a little bit about my story, which also comes from a place of essentially suffering from my own gut symptoms with IBS in particular. So I have um, worked as a dietitian for the last 11 years, and I specialized into gastroenterology and gastrosurgery quite early on in my career working in the NHS. And I am someone who has always suffered from IBS symptoms, but ironically, not chosen to ignore it, but kind of just gotten on with it because I assumed it was normal. But things got really bad for me post COVID, actually, when I had been working throughout COVID as a dietitian on the front line. And then when I went back to work and I was trying to balance my own business on the side, I got such terrible gut symptoms that I ended up in hospital, needing to have a camera up my bum and have the colonoscopy. And I was just like you, Hattie, going at a million miles an hour, just on that hamster wheel, long hours at work, trying to do training. And I was a gym girly at the time, and also like doing my yoga practice, but also my yoga practice was very like Ashtanga and Vinyasa and power and like go, 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 and kind of like punishing my body in ways. And like I said, I ended up in hospital with all these terrible gut symptoms. And they told me that thankfully, well, they at one point thought I had IBD actually. But then when I went back for repeat testing, they were like, no, you don't have IBD, which was a great relief. But it was in that moment that I realized it was the stress and my unsustainable, fast paced lifestyle, which was causing my gut symptoms. Because if I do say so myself, my diet was relatively healthy, but I was like eating on the go and like eating in front of my computer screen and eating with distraction and, not chewing my food properly and not breathing properly in throughout the day, like shallow chest breathing and not allowing my diaphragm to fully relax. And so that was the thing that kind of sparked my whole journey towards becoming a yoga teacher, because I knew about the importance of the gut brain connection and how food is so much more than just about what we eat. It's also about how our brain talks to our gut. So I went to Bali and Indonesia and did my yoga teacher training to become a yoga teacher. And then when I came back, I started to talk to my patients about integrating more holistic practices alongside dietary change. So not just focusing on the low FODMAP diet, but also integrating things like yoga, meditation, breath work alongside this dietary change. And what I found personally, and then what I started to notice in my patients, was much bigger improvements in symptoms. So we were talking about not just what to eat, but how to eat, and also talking about lifestyle in a much greater detail. And again, similar to you, Hattie, just like slowing down. And I found that many people face challenges when navigating IBS on their own, because I think the low FODMAP diet is a really well-known diet that people can follow, but without the right guidance, it can be very complicated and very difficult, and people can become very lost and not get reliable or draw conclusions from the diet, and therefore can become very disheartened. So, facing the challenges of IBS on your own can be very difficult, and not everyone has access to a dietitian, especially now in the NHS. I know that the current situation is quite dire in terms of waiting times to go see dietitians. In some trusts, up to 18 months before they can get an appointment. So yeah, that was like a really common frustration I see amongst some patients. So that's from like diagnosis delays to like information overload also now on social media, when like everyone is talking about gut health, from registered and credible professionals like myself, but also to then lots of influencers who don't have much scientific backing to what they're saying, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. So I guess the reason why I wanted to share my story, as well as Hattie share her story, is to give you all reassurance that you're not alone in this. And that's quite literally how these two companies, Bay's Kitchen and Belly Balance, have been born, because we saw a need to support more people with IBS in a way that's accessible and makes the whole journey just that little bit easier. So I'll pass back over to you, Hattie.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting just what you said about the breath work then, Kaitlin. As a real chosen 10 minutes of my day, I am, focusing on my breath work. And it's one of those things that, oh, I don't need to do it, or I could just skip it. But it just gives you that space to, calm your nervous system down and start your day. So I would say, that's been another huge, adapting another factor into your lifestyle change. But yeah, absolutely, that is exactly why we exist when it comes to Belly Balance and Bay's Kitchen. And it was a pretty much a spooky turn of coincidence that Bay's Kitchen came on my doorstep. As this is it just made so much sense to me, and the brand, I hadn't seen any brand out there really talking about the low FODMAP diet in the food space as much as Bay's Kitchen. So I'm going to take it back. So in terms of our brand mission, it's really simple. I think once you are in the middle of, an IBS flare up, or, you've been battling with it for a number of weeks, months, years, however long it is, there is a real lack of joy that comes with eating. And everything is second guessed. You kind of finish a meal, and my personal experience was that, what is this going to do to me? How long until it's go time on flare up? And whether it's an hour or 2 hours or a night of them rolling around in bed uncomfortable, what's next? So what Bay's Kitchen does is removes that fear and removes that those second guessing. And it's a really simple mission, and that is to bring confidence, flavor, and ease back to those 1 in 5 people in the UK that are currently diagnosed. So that's not just not diagnosed, they're just the diagnosed. So 13 million people in the UK, and bring that joy back, so that everybody can sit around the table together and eat as one. And you don't have to apologize. I'm so sorry, guys, I have to be the awkward one, and you have to make something separate for me because of my food intolerances or because of my gut health. And that's where I've put together in big bold letters there, it's something you can serve in the middle of the table, made beautifully with clean ingredients. We've just done an analysis on some of our concentrated stock ranges. We've only got 5 ingredients, and the next big brand seller, which classes themselves as organic, has 11 ingredients in them. So we are minimal ingredients, beautifully made cooking sauces and stocks. And I think there is a real need state for this within the supermarkets. If you walk down that free from aisle, I find it incredibly clinical. I find it, dull and very little options for people who suffer with food intolerances. If you have the stomach of steel, and you walk down your cooking sauce aisle in the supermarket, if you are on a budget, saving the pennies, and want to feed a big family of five, you can pick up a big old jar of dolmio sauce. Or, it's treat night, it's date night with your other half. You know what? Do you know what? I'm going to go for a gymkhana, or I'm going to go for an ottolenghi. I'm going to push the boat out. Or, I'll go for the mid-range, and I'll go for a Lloyd Grossman Thai green, or or a teriyaki, or a Thai massaman. Whatever you want, you have the options there. That's quick, convenient, easy. Whereas if you go down the free from aisle, and you have a gluten intolerant, you have a dairy intolerance, or some of your triggers are onion, garlic, or they're fructose. You can't eat struggle with kind of high fructose items like tomatoes. There's nothing currently on any of our supermarket shelves that serves that need state. Um, and we've come a long way in the last 10 months, a year. The team did an incredible job of getting to a really good selection on Ocado, and we're in Amazon, and we do amazing opportunity to speak to our customers on direct to our website. But we launched into Waitrose in January, which was a huge milestone. And we've given those shoppers that need state to go, actually, do you know what? I really fancy a tikka masala, or I really fancy a sweet and sour, or I really fancy a tomato and basil pasta. And you then have the option that's no onion, no garlic, gluten-free, dairy-free, clean ingredient. They're all made with easy to digest formulations. And what I mean by that is that they are all low FODMAP certified. So they've been certified by low FODMAP standards over in Australia. And so that is all of your tomatoes, for example, have been measured to stay within the threshold, so that they're safe to eat for you. And as I say, the only brand doing this currently in the UK. And it's made for everybody. And we've got a huge, gorgeous selection. So we've got Thai sauces, we've got Indian sauces, we've got Italian sauces, a range of beautiful cooking-based stocks, which have 38% chicken in it, compared to the leading brands that have 40% salt in. And so I'm so proud to work with Bay's Kitchen. I've got an incredible team, and we are all really focused on the mission ahead, and that is literally to bring back that joy that's been lost along the way of IBS. And I think we've got a lot to do, but it's we're at a really exciting time for the team and the business, and hopefully, yeah, we'll be coming to all supermarkets and giving people those options so that they can eat together.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Hattie. And yeah, the Bay's Kitchen range are so delicious and convenient and easy, and it's so great to continue to see the spread of the product across the UK market. And can you buy it anywhere else, or is it just UK?
So no, we've got a couple of markets. So we actually just have started distributing to Ireland, which is really exciting. And we have Norway as a distributor. We have worked with Australia in the past, and Australia obviously is a huge market for low FODMAP. So we're currently exploring new opportunities there, and also Switzerland as well. So yeah, we're starting to open up outside of the UK, but right now we've got a big old job to do with our supermarkets in the UK. But Kaitlin, we need them in Ibiza with you, basically.
Yes, you need them in Ibiza. You also need them in Sweden, for sure,
Yes.
where Belly
Yeah.
Balance comes from. If they're in
Yeah.
Norway, hopefully they can soon get to Sweden.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Ibiza would be great. That's where I live, everyone, for those of you who don't know. So Hattie's given a beautiful introduction into Bay's Kitchen, all the products available. And just to let you know, we will be providing you with a discount code that you can use to buy any of the Bay's Kitchen products. So that discount code will be coming at the end of the webinar. So just to give you a bit of information as to what Belly Balance is, for those of you who don't know. So Belly Balance is an app. It's an app designed to help those with IBS through the low FODMAP diet, as well as an all-in-one toolkit to help manage IBS symptoms, meaning it doesn't just talk about the low FODMAP diet. So looking here, you'll see that we have the digital IBS treatment developed by our experts. So that's myself, the founder, Sophia, and a gastroenterologist called Kaitlin, who's from Switzerland. And this is an 11-step program which guides you through FODMAP reduction, reintroduction, and personalization. So it's basically like having a dietitian in your pocket, and it's a really fantastic way to access dietetic care if NHS waiting times are super long. We also have a really unique FODMAP barcode scanner. So you can literally pick up a product, scan its barcode, and it will tell you whether it's high, medium, or low in FODMAPs. And we also have a feature that if a product is high FODMAP, then it can suggest a low FODMAP alternative. So all of the, maybe not all, but I think most of the Bayes Kitchen products are within our scanner. We also have a food, mood, and symptoms diary. So you can input and track not only what you eat, but your mood, your symptoms, your toilet habits. And then it provides actionable analytics. So you can see here it provides a graph, and you can also now export this data to be able to send to your healthcare professional or your dietitian. We have comprehensive FODMAP lists within the app, so searchable lists. So let's say if you can't remember if apples are high or low FODMAP, then you can search in the list and it will tell you. And then one of my favorite features is that there are over 600 low FODMAP recipes and weekly menus within the Belly Balance app. So it really does take all of the guesswork and the hard work out of knowing what to cook and what to eat when on the low FODMAP diet. And some of these recipes are super, super yummy. And as well as all of that, we then have courses and videos and audios on yoga, meditation, breath work, newly added tapping, and gut-directed hypnotherapy from the wonderful Helen Brooks, who is known as the Tummy Whisperer on Instagram. So do check her out. So I really like, I work with Belly Balance because I truly believe in the product, and I love how it's not just diet focused. It really does focus on all of these other lifestyle elements, and of course all of those practices that I teach with my clients as well. So we're now going to spend the second half of the webinar talking through some practical low FODMAP tips and IBS management. So 5 things that you can start doing today to help you along your IBS journey. And just a reminder that if you do have any questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the chat, or we will come to answer them all at the end, or you can jump on your camera at the end of the webinar and ask them directly to us. So I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about was common FODMAP traps, which people often fall into, which then makes their FODMAP journey or their IBS journey very difficult, because they often might think they're following the low FODMAP diet, but you don't feel as though you're getting the desired results. And that could be because there are hidden sources of FODMAPs that you might not expect within the foods and drinks that you're eating. So for example, garlic and onion hiding in sauces, stocks, seasonings, and ready meals. And that's quite literally why Bayes Kitchen created the products that they did, because you can buy sauces, stocks, and all of those things that are onion and garlic free. Just a note that, just because a product is free from, it doesn't mean it's always low in FODMAPs. Free from typically means it's free from gluten, dairy, wheat, but FODMAP sauces come from all sorts of other different foods, including things like fruits and vegetables. And so free from isn't a reliable label to rely on when trying to follow the low FODMAP diet. And also honey, agave, and high FODMAP sweeteners are often found in what we would think are healthy products. And, doesn't mean they're not healthy, but it just means they're not suitable to be eaten whilst on that restriction phase of the low FODMAP diet. So it basically is all about really getting to know your FODMAP ingredients, and also using resources like the Belly Balance app, which has the barcode scanner to help make your shopping and choosing of products a lot easier. So some really simple swaps that you can do. So using garlic oil instead of garlic cloves in your cooking, using the green tops of spring onions for onion flavor rather than actual white or red onion. And basically just getting into the habit of always checking the labels and looking beyond the front of the pack. You really have to look through all of the ingredients on the list to double check to make sure that there aren't any high FODMAP ingredients. And like I said, Bayes Kitchen products, you can be guaranteed are low FODMAP. And Hattie, is there like a sign or a symbol on front of pack for Bayes Kitchen which
Yeah,
states?
it's our first call out on the jar, which is low FODMAP certified, followed by, gluten, dairy free, and our sauce says vegan. So it's really, really well labeled.
Perfect. So yeah, looking out for products that do have it clearly labeled, and if not, then always checking back of pack. Because I guess on the flip side also, just because a product isn't labeled as low FODMAP doesn't mean that it's not low FODMAP. So there's thousands of products out there which are naturally low FODMAP, but they're not labeled and certified as. So that's why it's really important to get used to reading labels, because yeah, you might be able to actually eat more foods than you think you might.
But I guess, Caitlin, that's probably again where the Belly Balance app will really help. Just if there's so many foods out there.
Yeah.
If you're ever struggling or doubtful, that all of those ingredients and those recipes will. It's yeah, a bit of a gem.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. The other thing to bear in mind when following a low FODMAP diet is portion size. So portion sizes matter because it's not always about cutting out foods entirely, because portion size is key. And what I mean by that is some foods are considered low FODMAP in smaller portion sizes. So I think, beans, pulses, and lentils have this bad rep of being like high FODMAP regardless. But actually, things like tinned lentils and even tinned chickpeas, when thoroughly rinsed, can be low FODMAP in small amounts. And as a dietitian, I always encourage my patients to actually include small amounts of these foods in their diet, because they're such a fantastic source of dietary fiber. And one of the biggest concerns of going on the low FODMAP diet is often people then significantly reduce their fiber intake, which also isn't beneficial for gut health or gut symptoms. So, including small amounts of certain foods is really important, but just being careful of portion sizes. Similarly, some fruits are fine in small portion sizes, but high FODMAP in larger portions. And again, you can use the Belly Balance app as the go-to reference for safe portion sizes for all of these different fruits and vegetables and foods. Because really following the low FODMAP diet is about finding your threshold with lots of different fruits and vegetables. It's not about this lifelong restriction. I'm not sure if you would add anything,
Yeah, no,
Hattie.
yeah, it's so interesting. It's having it being so raw, the journey, everything. I'm sure as everybody on the call, we can all relate so hard to certain points of Caitlin's tips and tricks. And when you yeah when you find out what your portion size and what the right thing is for you, you get to, you still can have such a varied diet. And right now I am definitely under eating on fiber, because I have found a diet that really works for me. And it's almost, to be completely honest with you, I'm a bit scared and a bit, nervous to go outside of what's really working for me. So, it's really interesting now hearing, Kaitlin, as an expert, in this field, talk about actually introducing chickpeas in a smaller level will probably help me get to a better place with my fiber intake, as I am, not going to the toilet regularly and not having that that I'm not meeting those fiber dietary needs. So for me personally, it's about understanding, portion sizes matter. So I'm taking a lot from that.
Amazing. Thank you, Hattie. The next thing to be conscious of is to ensure that for anyone thinking about going down the low FODMAP route, it's important to try and move out of the elimination phase within the first kind of 4 to 6 weeks. We now have evidence to show that people who stay on a strict low FODMAP diet for longer than 8 weeks, it can significantly start to reduce the diversity of the gut microbiome. The elimination phase of the low FODMAP diet was always designed to be followed for only 2 to 6 weeks. The stricter you are with a low FODMAP diet, the more likely you are to see improvements. And therefore, some people can see improvements within the first 2 weeks and then start to go on to that reintroduction phase. And the reintroduction phase is when you systematically reintroduce foods from each of the different FODMAP groups one by one to be able to test and identify tolerance. And reintroduction is done in a way that's gradual so that you're able to test your tolerance threshold. Because as we were just saying on the previous slide, some foods are tolerated in small amounts, but not in larger quantities. And then once you've gone through this reintroduction stage, you're then left with the personalized diet, which is your unique tolerance diet. And that will be different to someone else. And so often when I see these major food groups being demonized or being targeted, like it must be gluten, it must be lactose, that's not necessarily the case for everyone. And especially the gluten intolerance really gets me, because often it's not gluten which is the problem, it's fructans, which is another component found in gluten-based foods, which is why often people tolerate bread differently to pasta, and also onion and garlic, because they contain fructans. So it's really important to go through this reintroduction and personalization to identify your unique tolerance. And like I said, staying in elimination long term can reduce gut bacterial diversity and lead to unnecessary restriction, making your diet much harder to sustain in the long run. So reintroduction is all about trying to find freedom within the diet, because as I said at the very beginning, the low FODMAP diet is a challenging diet to follow, and it was never designed to cause unnecessary restriction in the long term.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Caitlin, and a lot of our customers and people seeking out advice on low FODMAP with Bay's Kitchen, is this just for the elimination phase of the diet? And what the positioning of Bay's Kitchen in the short in the best summary, they're really flipping delicious sauces. And so, they are not just for the elimination phase, because, we have, really, really crafted, as I say, a clean ingredient, minimal ingredient, delicious, easy to use, convenient cooking sauce that, mum, dad, grandma, granddad, and the kids can all eat together. So, whilst, people do seek out Bay's Kitchen for as part of that elimination phase, this, with all the added benefits of them, and just the pure fact that they are so much tastier than what's out there, they are for the longer term. And, I'm sure if hopefully today you all get to try some after this call with our specialised discount code, you'll be able to see for yourself how delicious they are. That they're not just elimination; they're for life.
And also, I think Bay's Kitchen products can serve a really useful place in the diet, because as we've just been talking about, often people will have a tolerance threshold. So let's say someone is sensitive to onion and garlic, by having Bay's Kitchen products, say, at home, then that might give them more freedom to, say, eat out at a restaurant or a friend's house where it's more
Yeah.
difficult to avoid onion and garlic. But at least then
Mm.
across the day or throughout the week, your total garlic and onion intake is a lot lower than it would be because you've been using Bay's Kitchen products at home.
Yeah, definitely. And it's about not missing out of those weekend treats. For so long on the elimination, you do feel like, if everybody's sat down and it's the Sunday night curry occasion, or Friday night Chinese night, there's this element that you don't have to miss out, because
Mm.
you can all eat together and you can all eat a better version of it. So yeah, I think that's super important as well to mention.
Yeah, amazing. The other thing to note is the gut-brain connection. And I love talking about this topic because it really is my passion project, in that IBS isn't just about food. So we can bang on about the low FODMAP diet and, low FODMAP products as much as we like. But if we are, eating even low FODMAP in this stressed and anxious state, as both you and I have experienced, Hattie, then our gut is never going to feel its best. And that's because stress and anxiety directly affect gut symptoms via the gut-brain connection. So the two-way communication pathway between the gut and the brain via the vagus nerve, which when we're stressed and anxious, it can up-regulate those signals and increase the sensitivity of our gut muscles, a term called visceral hypersensitivity, which then means kind of when you eat anything, your body perceives those natural sensations of digestion as a threat and can cause things like pain and bloating. And therefore, managing stress is as important as managing diet for many people with IBS. And practices that can help that communication between the gut and the brain are things like the gut-directed hypnotherapy, yoga, meditation. They all have a really strong clinical evidence base, and all of which are available via the Belly Balance app. So it's important to think about how to implement some of these practices alongside the dietary change. And I know, like you said, Hattie, you're doing these 10 minutes of breath work every day. And for a lot of my patients, I recommend doing a simple breathing exercise before meal times, because it can literally then switch the body into that parasympathetic state, that rest and digest state, which can help the body to digest the food we're about to eat a lot better.
Yeah, it's this has been everything, and I love how passionate you are about this, Kaitlin, because this, I never paid attention to this part of the journey until recently, and understanding how stressed and anxious I was, and how stressed and anxious eating was making me. This kind of building yourself up to failure almost when you go into meal times and thinking, what is going to happen next, what's next. So this has been such a big part of my journey. So I just can't, I can't say how much it's it's everything. It's part of this, a part of the IBS journey. So yeah, I love that we're talking about it.
And just to add, to start implementing these practices into your lifestyle, it doesn't have to be an hour yoga class 3 times a
Yeah.
week. Research has shown that as little as 5 minutes of breathing or meditation a day can make a significant difference. So I always recommend apps like Insight Timer, Calm, Headspace, the Belly Balance app, of course, to give you that start to implement some of these practices kind of into your day to day.
Amazing.
And then the final thing I wanted to mention is about eating habits that matter also, because how you eat can be just as important as what you eat. So making sure that you try to stick to regular meal times, because consistent meal timing helps to regulate digestion. I like to think of fiber as the personal trainer for our gut. So just like we would go to the gym and lift weights to train our arm muscles and our leg muscles, dietary fiber is that personal trainer for our gut. So if you're eating meals regularly that contain dietary fiber, that helps to train the gut to function in a regular manner. If we skip meals or we go a very long time without meals, then the gut doesn't have anything to get it to work, and it can become sluggish and irregular. So it's really important to try to regulate your meal times. The other thing, as me and Hattie have both mentioned, is to really slow down with your meals. So eating more mindfully, because rushing can really start to trigger symptoms. Chewing very quickly, eating on the go, not breathing properly before meals or during meals can really impact digestion. And similarly to that, chewing your food properly, because digestion starts in the mouth, not in the stomach. So when we chew our food, it mixes with our saliva, the food already starts to break down into chyme before it reaches the stomach. And so the more we can chew and more thoroughly we can chew our food, the better our digestion will be. And then the fourth thing is try to reduce meal stress. So If possible, eating in a calm environment supports better digestion. So trying to take a dedicated, even 10 minutes away from your desk to eat your lunch is much better than eating it in front of a computer. Trying to take some time outside. I know it's been really nice weather in the UK. And yeah, just really being very mindful of how you're eating your meals can all help to support that gut-brain connection, activate that rest and digest state, and help improve digestion before the food even gets to your tummy. Anything you want to add, Hattie?
No, just yeah, it's the regular meals one is a big one for my journey, and understanding fueling your body better. As part of my new dietary process, I make sure I'm hitting a certain amount of calories a day, which is eating regularly, so that I don't end up getting hungry and then rushing and then trigger symptoms happening. So yeah, no, just it's all super important and can relate to all of them.
So we're coming towards the end of the webinar now, so I just want to wrap up by really going through how it is that Belly Balance and Bay's Kitchen can support you through your IBS journey. So Belly Balance, as I've said, is an app which is now recommended by the BDA as one of the apps which can help patients with IBS. And it is a dietitian-led app, meaning it was created by dietitians for patients with IBS, so it's evidence-based. It contains the 11-step low FODMAP program with guided support, the food diary, the barcode scanner, the 600 low FODMAP recipes, lifestyle practices like the gut-directed hypnotherapy, yoga, meditation, breath work, tapping, and so much education and ongoing support for IBS management. So within the app, we also have articles, we have scientific studies published on our website. We also have additional articles, so things like how to choose a low FODMAP protein powder, stuff about supplements and IBS. So it really is a wealth of information to help you with your IBS journey. And if there are any dietitians out there watching this webinar, then it's a fantastic tool to support you in your clinical practice, and also to help support your patients in your clinical practice as well. So I'll hand over to Hattie to talk about Bay's Kitchen.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for everybody that's joined. But yeah, so Bay's Kitchen, as I've mentioned, also in association with the British Dietitian Association, so that wasn't pulled out, but we have done lots of work with them the last 10 months, which we're super proud of. So we create low FODMAP certified, IBS friendly cooking sauces, stocks, and condiments to support those with gut health and food intolerances. Our range is all low FODMAP certified, so that means it has been sent off under lab testing. So we do all the hard work for you in terms of label checking and measuring every single ingredient that goes into our product range to make sure that it's safe to eat. Made without onion and garlic. They're super easy and convenient to use. Ready in 3 to 4 minutes. They are literally stir-in sauces, and we've got an incredible wide range so that nobody misses out. So as I say, Indian, Chinese, Asian sauces, along with your kind of Italian classics. So everything from midweek staples to weekend treats. And we're here to make everything tasty, accessible, and bring the joy back to home cooking, where some of that joy might have been lost.
Fantastic. Thank you, Hattie. So that does bring us to the end of our presentation and our end of our webinar this evening. So this is your opportunity for anyone watching to ask us any questions that you might have. So please feel free to put any questions in the chat box, or if you would like to jump on your microphone or your camera to ask, just a reminder, this is being recorded, so your video will be recorded. So I'll give you some time to put some questions in. Someone has come through with a question already saying, thank you for sharing your stories with us. Hattie, can you tell me more about the intolerance test you did at the pharmacy, please? As I did a hair intolerance test online, and the gastro consult told me to disregard this as it's likely to be inaccurate. Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Sammy. Yeah, really good question. I also got advised of several different online tests. I went directly to my local pharmacy as a recommendation through a friend who had gone and done a simple food allergens test. And it's, you are tested against everything from, liquids, wine, food, dairy, gluten, different types of gluten, and about 50 or 60 food groups came back absolutely fine for me. And I got a really, really high result on milk, cow's milk, and also egg yolk. And as soon as I eliminated lactose from my diet, it wasn't everything. And I thought I actually cried when I got the results because I was so relieved that, I had an answer. And so I thought, this is it. I'm going to be absolutely fine now. I'm lactose free. And, I was still suffering. So I still had to follow a low FODMAP diet to find my other triggers, i.e., honey and, FODMAP stacking throughout the day if I'd had lots of fructose and fructans. So for me, there was additional triggers that I needed to source and find out. But lactose intolerance was a huge one for me, and there's brilliant options on the market now. M&S doing a lovely milk that's lactose free. I found my favourite yogurt, which is the Faye 0%, which is lactose. The specific name of the test, I will find out and pop into the chat. Yeah, I'll find that for you.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think in regards to um, the hair intolerance test, yeah, that is not a validated test, and it's not a validated way to diagnose a food intolerance. So I would agree with your gastro doctor in that it's to disregard that result. I think the test, it sounds like the test you're talking about, Hattie, was like an IgG food intolerance test, which can give you an indication as to IgG food intolerances in the blood. The thing with these, just to add a caveat, the thing with these tests are they are not
Yeah.
FDA approved, so they're not approved by the Food and Drinks Administration standards, because often when we eat particular foods, our body produces a certain amount of antibodies to help us digest that food. So often these tests can come back with a whole list of foods which we have either just eaten more recently or eat the most of, and it doesn't necessarily give an accurate picture to the intolerances we actually have. That being said, some people do eliminate certain foods and certain food groups and do find benefit and relief. But as you said, Hattie, this test was just kind of a starting point and it wasn't the full picture. And you still had to kind of
Yes.
work through the FODMAP process to identify the fructose intolerance, which wouldn't have come up on this test anyway. So it is useful to use this test as like a guide, but not kind of like a
Yeah.
black and white answer, if that makes sense. Because like you said, you still then had ongoing symptoms despite removing some of those foods from your diet.
Yeah. It was the York test, just so you're aware. Yeah, that was the test that I asked for in terms of the food intolerances, York test, at the pharmacy.
Yeah. And someone has asked, thank you both for your presentation. The doctor says you cannot get an IBS test, so how do you know you have it? Really good question. So
Mm.
IBS is diagnosed through a process of elimination. You are completely correct. Unfortunately, there isn't a test you can take to say you have IBS. So what I mean by a process of elimination is you should be tested for things like celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And once all of that has been eliminated, then we can start to point the finger at IBS. There is a specific diagnostic criteria for IBS, which was developed by the Rome 4 criteria, which states that IBS can only be diagnosed if you have recurring abdominal pain associated with two or more of the following. So a change in frequency of your bowels, so increasing the amount you open your bowels or decreasing, the change in consistency, so they become looser or harder, and also the abdominal pain either improves or worsens when you open your bowels. So if you then meet that diagnostic criteria, then you can have a diagnosis of IBS. Someone says, I'm so excited to buy your Indian jar. Onions are my big problem. Thanks so much. Eating a small amount of something, e.g. chickpeas for me, may really help me not get ill, or trying to get more fiber, but hard to balance. Yes. Um,
Amazing.
Someone's asked, can you give a bit of guidance around the reintroduction phase, please? How long should you trial something for before removing it again? Does it have to be specific items like onion, for example? Do you have to try brown onion by itself, then red, then spring? So, Sammy, this is quite a long process, but it is all explained within the Belly Balance app. So do have a look at the 11-step program within that app, and it guides you through step by step exactly what you need to do.
Amazing. Ed said, I have been struggling for years and pretty much on a massively restricted diet as it has knocked my confidence with regards to reintroducing foods. I worry about reactions. Also, I find that foods I tolerate go through phases where I don't tolerate them. Um, and I'm completely with you on that one, in terms of the confidence, and learning to trial things back in. But I would say, from experience and what the great advice that Caitlin had just given then, in terms of small amounts can be reintroduced as a part of a healthy balanced diet. But yeah, Caitlin, I'm sure you're better to answer on terms of the tolerating phase and how we go about when you don't tolerate them.
Um, yes. So yes, the gut microbiome is constantly changing, and depending on also like the stress that we're under, our gut can react very differently to different foods. And so, Ed says, I find that foods I tolerate go through phases where I don't tolerate them. And that's why it's always important to retest foods that you previously haven't been able to tolerate, because you may find that in future your gut adapts and you are able to tolerate foods in a different way. So it's important to constantly test. Um, I'm just conscious of the time, so we'll come on to this last question. Is there a difference between wheat intolerance and gluten intolerance, or is it the same thing? So really good question, and they are actually different. So gluten intolerance is when you have an intolerance to the specific protein found in wheat, rye, and barley, which is gluten. Wheat intolerance is different because you can react to just the wheat grain, but you'd still be okay with things like rye and barley, for example. And so they are different things. But when we look specifically at FODMAPs, we're looking at the fructans within wheat-based products, which is why on the low FODMAP diet, you can still have normal soy sauce and you can actually still drink beer, because although they contain wheat, they are free from fructans. So yeah, wheat intolerance, gluten intolerance, fructan intolerance are all slightly different things.
Amazing.
So unless there was anything else you wanted to add, Hattie?
No, just thank you everybody for being so engaged, and thank you for an amazing session. I've personally taken a lot from there on all your guidance, Caitlin. It's been brilliant, and hopefully we've introduced a new option for everybody on the call when it comes to supporting the low FODMAP diet, and having tasty brilliant meals brought back to you.
Amazing. And we didn't mention it, but the discount code
We
for
did.
Base
Yeah.
Kitchen
Yeah.
is Belly Balance 10, which gives you
Yes.
10% off your entire order.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Please try the range, get a good mixture, and see how you get on with them. But yeah, that code is just for you guys on the call today.
Perfect. And this webinar will be sent out to you via email. It will also be posted on the Bayes Kitchen YouTube channel, as well as within the Belly Balance app. So please do find us on social media, online, sign up to our newsletters to be in the know. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for all your engaged questions, and yeah, have a lovely rest of your
Thanks
evening.
all. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.